Humanity had never been the dominant force in the galaxy. For millennia, they had been just another species, struggling to make their mark in a universe dominated by ancient, powerful empires. The Zeltrax Dominion, the Gorvian Empire, and other galactic powers ruled with an iron fist, their technological advancements light years ahead of humanity's own. But that was before the last war. The Terran Federation, though a fledgling entity in the galactic community, had begun to make strides. Their planetary expansion was rapid, and their technology was evolving at a pace never seen before. They had learned from the best, adapted, and, in many ways, surpassed the expectations of the galaxy's established powers. But all of that had come at a cost. In the dark corners of space, where the most dangerous factions lurked, humanity was seen as an irritation, a species that could be ignored, pushed around, and eventually crushed. Admiral Kayla Sharp had fought for years to protect her people. A no-nonsense leader with a reputation for brilliance in strategy and brutal efficiency, she had seen the way the universe viewed humanity. Her mission was clear: keep Earth safe, ensure humanity's survival, and maybe, just maybe, rise to a place where the galaxy could no longer ignore them. As the Federation's military arm, the USS Leviathan had become humanity's strongest weapon. At its helm stood Admiral Sharp, leading her people through numerous skirmishes, always finding a way to survive. But all of that was about to change. Humanity's path to greatness would not be an easy one. For the Zeltrax Dominion, a militaristic empire with ambitions far beyond its borders, humanity's growth was seen as an existential threat. Earth's rapid expansion into the outer rim of the galaxy caught their attention, and they had decided that humanity's time was up. The first attacks were subtle, small skirmishes meant to test the Federation's defenses. But they were growing bolder. The last straw came when a Zeltrax fleet was detected entering the Sol system. Their intentions clear: invade Earth and wipe out humanity's seat of defiance once and for all. As the Dominion's warships loomed on the horizon, humanity's leadership found itself in a moment of reckoning. Could they stand against the might of a galaxy-old empire? Or would they crumble under the weight of their arrogance? On the bridge of the USS Leviathan, Admiral Sharp stood, gazing at the holographic display of Earth. The planet was bright and full of life, but she knew the approaching storm would soon change everything. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. This was not just about saving Earth. It was about making the galaxy understand that humanity would no longer be a pawn in their game. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered, her voice cutting through the silence. "We are not just defending our home, we're sending a message to the entire galaxy." The Leviathan was humanity's pride and joy, a massive warship designed to outmatch anything the galaxy had seen before. With cutting-edge technology and devastating weapons, it was more than just a military vessel. It was a symbol of humanity's defiance. As the crew of the USS Leviathan scrambled to prepare for the battle ahead, Sharp's mind raced through the options. She knew this battle would define humanity's future. It wasn't just about the survival of Earth, it was about survival for all of humanity. The Federation fleet gathered, but it wasn't enough. The Zeltrax Dominion's warships were too numerous. They had the firepower, the numbers, and the experience. Yet humanity's greatest weapon had always been its creativity. They may have been outgunned, but they were never outthought. Admiral Sharp turned to her first officer, Captain Liam Ross, a man who had served under her for years. He had been with her through countless battles, and his loyalty was unwavering. "What's the status on our tactical advantage?" she asked. Ross's face was grim, but resolute. "We've got the Leviathan in position. Shields are holding, weapons are primed, but the Zeltrax fleet has us outnumbered. We'll need to play this smart." Admiral Sharp nodded. This wasn't going to be a battle of brute force. It was going to be a battle of strategy. If they were going to survive, they needed to outmaneuver the enemy, not fight head-on. She took a deep breath. Humanity's survival rested on her shoulders. It had never been more real. This wasn't just a fight for land or resources. It was a fight for their very right to exist in the galaxy. In the distance, the Zeltrax fleet loomed, massive and foreboding, blocking out the stars. This was it. The last war humanity would ever fight. A war that would echo through the annals of galactic history. The fate of the galaxy was about to change. "Let's show them who we are," Admiral Sharp said, her voice cold but filled with conviction. And as the Leviathan and its fleet of Terran ships prepared for their first strike, humanity made its first stand against the galaxy that had long thought them weak. What would you do if faced with an impossible battle? Would you stand and fight, or would you give up? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more incredible sci-fi adventures. The battle for Earth was only the beginning. The Zeltrax Dominion had made their first strike against humanity, and though the Terran forces had held them off, the USS Leviathan and the Terran Federation fleet had taken heavy losses. What remained was a galaxy full of enemies who now knew that humans were not to be underestimated. Earth had held its ground, but the war was far from over. Admiral Kayla Sharp knew that the time for survival was ending. Humanity couldn't simply defend. They had to strike back, decisively. The Gorvian Empire, a long-established military force in the galaxy, had already taken note of humanity's actions. They could not afford to allow the Terran Federation to grow any further. Meanwhile, smaller but equally dangerous factions, eager for their own piece of the galaxy, began to rally to the Gorvian cause. The galaxy, it seemed, was on the brink of war. Humanity's resolve Admiral Sharp, still reeling from the loss of her friends, her officers, and so many innocent lives, looked out across the vast expanse of the Sol system, where Earth lay, scarred but still standing. In the vastness of space, it was easy to feel insignificant, lost amongst the stars. But not humanity. Not anymore. The Leviathan was more than just a ship. It was the heart of the Federation, its soul. And it would show the galaxy that humanity was no longer a pawn. The Terran Federation fleet had begun to reorganize, rallying to the cause. They were a patchwork of ships cobbled together from the few resources they had left. But their resolve was unwavering. Humanity's resolve had always been one of its greatest strengths. Admiral Sharp's voice crackled over the intercom, giving orders to the fleet as they prepared for a dangerous counteroffensive. They would no longer be on the defensive. This was their fight, and they were going to take it to their enemies. The first offensive under Sharp's command, the Terran fleet launched a coordinated strike against a Zeltrax forward base on the outskirts of the Seren Belt, an area rich in resources that the Dominion had used for their military buildup. Intelligence gathered by the Federation scouts had indicated a soft spot in the enemy's defenses. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them a foothold. Sharp had one rule for her fleet: strike first, strike hard, and never show mercy. As the Leviathan and her fleet approached the Zeltrax base, Sharp's eyes were focused, her mind calculating the odds. They were outnumbered, they were outgunned, but they had the element of surprise. They had human ingenuity. The Terran fleet arrived at the Zeltrax outpost under cover of a plasma storm, hiding them from the Dominion's sensors. As they broke through the storm, the Zeltrax defense systems were blindsided by the sudden, brutal attack. Blinding flashes of light and the sound of explosions filled the void as the first human weapons met the alien hulls. The Leviathan fired first, its plasma cannons tearing through enemy shields and ripping apart the first wave of Zeltrax ships. Admiral Sharp knew that if they could cripple this outpost, they would strike a serious blow to the Dominion's expansion efforts. Every minute spent engaging in combat was a minute they could not afford to waste. They were no longer a minor faction. The galaxy was not ready for what humanity could do when it was pushed to the edge. The tensions grow back on Earth. The leaders of the Federation watched the reports of the Leviathan's assault with bated breath. The victory was a message to the rest of the galaxy. Humanity was willing to pay the price for freedom, to shed blood for survival. But the war was not yet won, and every decision had its consequences. In the deep corridors of the Zeltrax war councils, the enemy commanders were beginning to realize that humanity would not simply fold in the face of terror. They had expected easy prey. They had been wrong. And as the Terran warships made their way deeper into Zeltrax territory, the Gorvian Empire began to take notice as well. For them, humanity was a minor threat that could be crushed quickly. But now, it was a threat with real teeth, and it was growing. The Gorvian fleet turned its attention to humanity. A war that was supposed to be a matter of conquest had now become a matter of survival. On board the USS Leviathan, the Terran fleet pressed forward, their victories mounting, but each was paid for with costly sacrifices. Each member of the fleet was aware that, at some point, the Gorvian Empire would retaliate, and it would be a battle humanity wasn't prepared for. Facing the unknown. As the Terran fleet ventured further into enemy territory, Admiral Sharp found herself torn between hope and dread. Humanity had made strides, but they still weren't ready for the full might of the Gorvian war machine. But they had one thing that the galaxy's established powers did not: human unity and ingenuity. The Terrans began to develop new technologies in secret. Energy shields that could withstand even the most devastating blasts, hyper-advanced stealth systems, and weapons that could pierce the toughest armor. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. They were evolving, but the costs were mounting. The more they fought, the more the weight of leadership pressed down on Sharp's shoulders. Would humanity survive this? Was there a chance they could emerge victorious from a war that seemed almost too vast for them to handle? The Zeltrax Empire would never forget the day humanity had fought back. What would you do if you had no choice but to face overwhelming odds? Would you stand tall, or would you falter in the face of destruction? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic sci-fi tales. The USS Leviathan soared through the stars, its engines humming with purpose. Admiral Kayla Sharp stood at the helm, staring out at the vast emptiness of space, the once calm silence now filled with an urgency she had never felt before. The Terran Federation had lost so much already, countless ships, countless lives, but in this moment, they would give everything they had to make sure Earth remained standing. After the brutal defense of Earth, humanity knew that they couldn't sit back any longer. The Zeltrax Dominion had shown their true colors. They would not stop until humanity had been crushed beneath their heel. Now, for the first time in this war, the Terran Federation was on the offensive. The first strike would be crucial. If they could hit the enemy's key strongholds, cripple their supply lines, and force the Zeltrax into a defensive position, the Terrans might just stand a chance. But time was against them. The Gorvian Empire was still lurking in the shadows, and any misstep could leave humanity exposed. Admiral Sharp addressed her fleet, her voice firm and resolute over the intercom. Today, we strike back. This is not just about defending Earth. This is about sending a message to every empire in this galaxy. We are here, we are strong, and we will not back down. The fleet moved into position, hidden behind a dense nebula cloud, their ships cloaked from the Zeltrax's sensors. Sharp's strategy was simple but risky. Take the fight straight to the heart of the Zeltrax's offensive. A key supply depot located in the Tython system was their target, and it was heavily defended by a fleet of battlecruisers and destroyers. This base supplied the Zeltrax war effort. Destroy it, and their entire advance would grind to a halt. As the Leviathan and its fleet emerged from the nebula cloud, the battle began. The Zeltrax fleet, caught off guard but not unprepared, opened fire. The Terrans had the advantage of surprise, and they used it to their full advantage, launching a vicious first strike. The Leviathan's weapons, plasma cannons, and advanced missile systems lashed out in coordinated bursts, obliterating the first wave of Zeltrak's battle cruisers. Enemy ships erupted in explosions, debris scattering across the battlefield as the Terran ships closed in. Sharp's fingers gripped the control panel tightly as the sounds of laser fire and missile impacts echoed through the ship's corridors. But this was no cakewalk. The Zeltraks retaliated with fury. Their massive warships, each bristling with more firepower than a small fleet, fired back. Shields flared as the Leviathan absorbed the hits, but the sheer magnitude of the Zeltrak's assault was taking its toll. "Shields at 50%, the Leviathan's chief engineer reported. "We need to retreat, Admiral." "Negative," Sharp snapped, her eyes fixed on the holographic battlefield. "We don't retreat, we push forward." The Terran fleet moved as one, the ships weaving in and out of the chaos, firing at precise targets. Admiral Sharp knew that time was limited. The Zeltrak's empire had more resources at their disposal, and the Terrans couldn't sustain a prolonged engagement without reinforcements. This battle would be their last stand, if they didn't break the Zeltrak's supply line now. "Weapons locked!" yelled the tactical officer. "Targeting Zeltrak's command vessel!" Sharp nodded. "Fire!" In that moment, the USS Leviathan's main cannon unleashed a beam of pure energy that tore through the Zeltrak's command vessel's hull, sending it into a violent spiral toward the nearby moon. A cheer erupted from the Terran fleet as the Zeltrak's flagship went silent. But the battle was far from over. The remaining Zeltrak ships regrouped and launched a counterattack, knowing that this was their chance to strike back. The next wave of Terran warships faced a barrage of fire that was so intense it seemed like the entire void around them was on fire. Then, something unexpected happened. The Zeltrak's fleet hesitated. For just a moment, the battle slowed. The Terran fleet had struck with such precision and power that the Zeltrak's commanders hesitated. They had never faced such fierce resistance before, and the sudden loss of their command vessel was too much of a blow. Doubt crept into their ranks. In that moment, Admiral Sharp knew they had them. "Now!" she ordered, her voice cold and commanding. The Terran fleet surged forward with renewed vigor, breaking through the faltering Zeltrak's lines. Human ingenuity and relentless determination turned the tide. One by one, Zeltrak's ships fell, their massive hulls turning to debris as the Terran warships continued their assault. When the dust settled, the Terran fleet stood victorious. The Zeltrak's base had been destroyed, their supply line shattered, and their morale broken. The Leviathan had dealt a blow that would be felt across the galaxy. As the Terran ships regrouped, Admiral Sharp stood on the command deck, looking out over the battlefield. The cost had been high. The loss of ships, the sacrifice of lives, and the sheer brutality of the battle weighed heavily on her heart. But there was no time to mourn. The Leviathan and its fleet had done the impossible. They had struck first. They had proven to the galaxy that humanity was no longer the underdog. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once, but it would never again. What would you do if faced with a battle you couldn't win? Would you stand and fight, or retreat to save yourself? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic HFY stories. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Terran fleet's victory at the Tython system had shaken the Zeltrak's dominion to its core, but it had also drawn the attention of another force, a much more dangerous one: the Gorvian Empire. The Gorvians had long been a major power in the galaxy, ruthless, methodical, and immensely powerful. Their fleet dwarfed anything humanity had ever faced. If the Zeltrak's dominion was the first wave, the Gorvian Empire was the storm that would follow. Their ships were a sight to behold, massive, heavily armed, and brimming with the latest galactic warfare technology. The news of humanity's unexpected victory had sent shockwaves across the galaxy, reaching the ears of the most feared military leaders in the universe. Admiral Kayla Sharp stood on the bridge of the USS Leviathan, her mind racing with the implications of the report she had just received. The Zeltraks were retreating, But it wasn't victory they celebrated. It was the arrival of something far more formidable, the Gorvian fleet, which was heading straight for Earth. The Admiral's pulse quickened. This was it. The moment humanity had feared had come to pass. The Gorvian Empire had decided humanity was too much of a threat to let go unchecked. Their fleet, a swarm of dreadnoughts, was on the move, and humanity's forces were outnumbered. Sharp could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. She had led humanity into this battle. She had led them through impossible odds and unimaginable losses. And now she was faced with a new question. Could humanity survive the full force of the Gorvian Empire? The arrival of the Gorvian fleet. The Gorvian armada arrived in the Sol system with the force of a natural disaster. Over 100 massive ships, each one capable of erasing entire cities with a single volley of plasma, dropped out of faster-than-light, FTL, travel, and entered the orbital space above Earth. The arrival of the Gorvian fleet was so sudden and overwhelming that even the most experienced officers aboard the USS Leviathan froze for a moment. Sharp stood still for a beat, then snapped into action. "Get me a fleet-wide status report now," she barked. Her voice broke through the stunned silence of the command deck. The Terran fleet had been riding the high of their victory. But this was different. The Gorvians were a different kind of enemy, and they were about to show humanity why they had never been challenged before. The holographic display on the Leviathan's bridge showed the incoming ships, their sheer size and firepower intimidating. Every Terran vessel seemed tiny in comparison. Sharp's eyes narrowed. "The fleet is standing by, Admiral," Captain Liam Ross, her first officer, reported. "We've got support from the Vanguard fleet, but they're not nearly enough. The Gorvian ships have enough firepower to destroy us." Sharp's voice was cold, resolute. "We're not backing down. Not this time." She had faced impossible odds before, but now the stakes were higher than ever. The Zeltrax Dominion had been a test, but the Gorvian Empire was a different kind of predator. It was a galactic war that could either destroy humanity or set them on a path to a new era of power. The first clash. The first volley from the Gorvian flagship, the invincible Leviathan, hit Earth's outer defense grid with the force of 1,000 suns. The defensive network that humanity had spent years constructing seemed laughable in the face of the Gorvian arsenal. Massive beams of energy ripped through the outer defenses, obliterating dozens of Terran satellite stations in seconds. "Shields down to 40%, a crew member yelled from the tactical station. The shockwave rattled the USS Leviathan, sending ripples of vibration through the deck. "Return fire," Sharp ordered immediately. The Terran fleet unleashed its own barrage, but their weapons, though effective against smaller ships, barely left a scratch on the Gorvian dreadnoughts. The enemy shields flickered, but held strong. The first clash was a test of resilience and resolve. But as the Gorvian fleet moved closer, Sharp knew there would be no retreat. Humanity had nowhere to go. Earth was their home, and they would defend it to the last breath. On the bridge of the USS Leviathan, the crew moved with a precision that only came from years of training and trust. They had no choice but to stay united. Their survival depended on it. The tide turns. Despite being outgunned, humanity's fleet began to make a stand. With lightning-fast tactics, they struck at the Gorvian fleet's weak points. Stealth fighters slipped through enemy lines, launching devastating torpedo strikes at the flanks of the Gorvian ships. The USS Leviathan, with its advanced weaponry and enhanced shields, took center stage, drawing the bulk of the enemy's fire and allowing the rest of the Terran fleet to strike from the shadows. But the Gorvian fleet was massive, and it was relentless. Each Terran victory, each small advantage, was met with a counterattack more brutal than the last. For every ship destroyed, it felt like 5 more took its place. The Gorvian ships kept coming, unfazed by the human onslaught. Still, Admiral Sharp and her fleet fought on, their resolve growing with each passing minute. They were running out of options, running out of time. an unexpected ally. Then, just as it seemed humanity's forces might falter under the might of the Gorvian Empire, a message came through the encrypted channels, an unexpected ally. The Lurian Ascendancy, a race that had once clashed with humanity over territorial disputes, had sent reinforcements. Their ships, sleek and agile, dove into the battle with precise and calculated efficiency, helping to turn the tide. This alliance, born out of mutual respect and necessity, was the spark humanity needed. The Gorvian fleet, now facing two full forces, began to retreat, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. They had underestimated humanity's ability to unite, to find allies where none had existed before. The moment of reckoning. As the Gorvian fleet began to pull back, Admiral Sharp stood before her crew, sweat dripping down her brow. The USS Leviathan had taken damage, but it wasn't over. The Gorvian Empire, though momentarily beaten, would return. But this time they would know. Humanity was no longer a weak species to be ignored. "What we just did here," Sharp began, her voice filled with both pride and a tinge of sadness, "was only the beginning. The galaxy now knows that humans will never kneel." As the fleet limped back to Earth, victorious but battered, Sharp couldn't shake the feeling that this was only one battle in a much larger war. The Gorvian Empire might have been forced to retreat, but they would return, and next time, they would come with a vengeance. The real question was, what would humanity do when the storm returned? Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic sci-fi adventures, where humanity's fight for survival continues against all odds. Admiral Kayla Sharp paced back and forth on the bridge of the USS Leviathan, her mind racing as the ghost of the Gorvian Empire's fleet loomed large in her thoughts. The battle had been brutal, but humanity had held their ground. Earth's defenses had withstood the full force of the Empire's assault, and for the first time, the galaxy had seen humans fight back with an intensity that matched their opponents. But victory had not come without cost. The Terran fleet had taken severe damage, and casualties had been higher than anyone had anticipated. A soft chime echoed across the bridge, signaling a communication. Captain Ross, her trusted first officer, turned to her, his face hard as stone. "Admiral, the Gorvian commanders have made their move. They're regrouping. They'll strike again." Sharp's voice was firm, but tinged with an edge of dread. She had suspected this day would come. The Terran fleet had succeeded in halting the Gorvian advance, but Admiral Sharp knew this was only temporary. The Gorvian Empire was a juggernaut, and it would not retreat indefinitely. Sharp had heard the rumors. The Gorvians had their own secret weapon, one that could tip the balance of the war in their favor. "What's the plan?" Ross asked, his face a mix of worry and determination. Sharp paused, glancing at the galaxy map projected in the center of the bridge. The Terran fleet was scattered, vulnerable, and still recovering from the last battle. Even though they'd struck a blow to the Gorvian forces, the enemy had more ships, more resources, and more time to prepare. Humanity had won one battle, but it could never rest on its laurels. "We need a plan to stop them now," Sharp said, her voice colder than the vacuum outside. "We have to push forward before they can regroup. If we wait for them to rebuild, it'll be too late. We need to find their weaknesses and strike before they strike again." A fractured alliance. Meanwhile, on the outer fringes of the Sol system, an unexpected turn of events was unfolding. The Lurian Ascendancy, a race of previously neutral alien species, had come forward with a stunning revelation. Their leaders, long suspected of staying neutral in galactic politics, now offered their fleet to humanity under one condition: humanity must prove it could be trusted. The Lurians, an enigmatic people with advanced technologies and strategies that baffled the finest minds of the Terran fleet, were not known for their alliances. For centuries, the Lurians had watched humanity's rise from the shadows. Their own species had suffered great losses in a previous war with the Zeltrax Dominion, and they had stayed out of galactic conflicts ever since. The Gorvian threat, however, had forced their hand. They could no longer remain silent in the face of such a brutal force. Admiral Sharp was skeptical, but knew that the Lurians held the key to tipping the balance of power. The Gorvians were on the offensive, and humanity was no longer able to stand alone. A meeting was arranged between the Terran Federation and the Lurian leaders. Sharp walked into the negotiation chamber with a sense of deep uncertainty. The room was dimly lit. Shadows of ancient Lurian architecture cast across the walls, their meaning lost in time. At the far end of the table sat Empress Nika, the leader of the Lurian ascendancy. She had the aura of power, a cold demeanor that had served her people well for millennia. "You seek our aid, Admiral Sharp," Empress Nika spoke, her voice smooth but laced with challenge. "But tell me, what will humanity offer in return?" "We'll offer everything we have, Empress." Sharp's words were blunt, but her eyes did not waver. "The Gorvians are coming, and we need you to help us stop them before they destroy us all." Nika's gaze softened, though her resolve did not. "We have the means to help you, Admiral. But know this, if we aid you, you must pledge to uphold the Lurian way. Humanity's fire must not burn out of control. If we offer our resources, they come with conditions. You must stay within the bounds of this war, and no more. Do you understand?" Sharp's heart raced, but she knew this was a moment that could change the course of the war. Humanity would not bow to any empire. Not the Gorvians, not the Zeltrax, not even the Lurians. But if they could work together, they might just be able to turn the tide. "Agreed," Sharp said, her voice firm. "We will fight, but we'll fight on our terms, together." The human resolve back aboard the USS Leviathan, Sharp returned to the command deck, her decision made. The Lurian alliance would not be easy, but humanity had no choice but to take risks. If they did not act now, the full force of the Gorvian Empire would break them apart. The next steps were clear. Humanity had to show their strength, not just in numbers, but in will. They had to show the galaxy that humans were no longer a people to be underestimated. "Get me the fleet, Captain Ross," Sharp ordered. "It's time we show the Gorvians the power of the Terran Federation." The precipice of change. As the USS Leviathan and the rest of the Terran fleet rallied together, the atmosphere among the crew shifted. The earlier uncertainty, the fear that had clouded their every move, began to dissipate. Humanity had faced overwhelming odds before and had always found a way to fight back. Now, the galaxy would see humanity's resolve. The Terran Federation was no longer simply defending their home. They were asserting their right to exist, to hold their ground, and to take their place as equals among the stars. The coming battle with the Gorvian Empire would be unlike anything they had ever faced, but Sharp knew something the enemies didn't. Humanity would never back down. And in this galaxy of empires, that was something worth fighting for. What would you do if the galaxy turned against you? Could you stand up against a force like the Gorvian Empire? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic stories where humanity faces its greatest challenges. The void of space was cold and silent, but within the battlefields of the galaxy, chaos reigned. The Gorvian Empire was no longer just a distant threat. It was upon them. Ships large and small filled the skies, battling with the ferocity of a species that had conquered countless worlds. Humanity's Terran fleet, although diminished and battered, had united like never before, fueled by the same iron resolve that had carried them through countless wars in the past. Admiral Kayla Sharp stood before the vast window of the USS Leviathan, watching as flashes of light tore through the inky blackness. The Gorvian fleet had launched a full-scale assault, their warships breaking through Terran defenses with ruthless precision. But this time, they were met with something they never expected: a humanity that would not break. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is advancing from 3 fronts." Captain Ross's voice broke through the tension in the room. His face, normally calm, was tense, his brow furrowed with the weight of the situation. "We've managed to hold our ground for now, but it won't last. Sharp's jaw clenched, her eyes narrowing. "We've known this day would come. This is the moment we've been training for. No more retreat. We stand, and we fight." In that moment, she felt it. The weight of the galaxy pressing in, the knowledge that this battle would determine the future of humanity's place in the stars. The stakes were higher than ever before. The Gorvian Emperor, known for his cold, calculating mind, had underestimated humanity. He believed they were weak, fragmented, and nothing more than a nuisance that could be crushed with ease. He had no idea that the Terran spirit was far stronger than any foe he had ever faced. As the Gorvian ships began their final assault, Sharp took a deep breath. Her hand hovered over the command panel, the buttons glowing beneath her fingers. This was their last stand, the final fight that would determine whether humanity would survive or fall. "All hands, prepare for full assault," Sharp barked, her voice steady, though the weight of the moment hung heavy. "No matter the cost, we defend our home, for Earth, for humanity." The battle unfolds. The Terran fleet, bolstered by their Lurian allies, was ready for the fight. Ships of all sizes, destroyers, frigates, and cruisers moved into position, forming a defense perimeter. The Leviathan, humanity's flagship, led the charge, its massive hull dwarfing the smaller vessels around it. The Leviathan's weapons systems were primed, the plasma cannons glowing a menacing blue as they charged. The first volley from the Gorvian warships ripped through the silence, a barrage of laser fire that shook the Terran fleet to its core. Sparks flew across the Leviathan's bridge as the ship's shields absorbed the brunt of the attack. The blast radius from the Gorvian shots sent smaller Terran ships spiraling out of control, their systems failing under the pressure. But humanity would not falter. The Terran fleet retaliated with a fury born of desperation and defiance. Missiles flew through the air, plasma blasts cut through enemy ships, and fighters darted around, weaving in and out of the chaos. The battle felt like an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. "Direct hit to the port side, shields down to 40%, Ross called out from the command station. The Leviathan groaned under the strain, but it held firm, its crew rallying in the face of certain annihilation. Sharp's heart raced as she watched the Gorvian flagship approaching, its massive frame blocking out the stars. It was a ship designed for destruction, built to outclass anything the Terrans had ever seen. Its dark, jagged edges made it look more like a weapon of war than a vessel of exploration. "Bring us into range! Lock on all weapons!" Sharp commanded, her voice sharp. The USS Leviathan swung its massive guns into place, targeting the Gorvian flagship. Humanity's moment. The battle raged on, and with every passing moment, humanity fought with the kind of resolve and unity that had carried them through their darkest days. They were defending their home, their families, their future. As the Leviathan closed the gap with the Gorvian flagship, Sharp could feel the weight of their collective resolve. The humanity in the fleet had never been more united, an alliance of Terrans, Lurians, and a handful of other species, all standing together against a common foe. "Target locked, Admiral," Ross shouted. "Weapons are hot, ready to fire." Sharp's fingers hovered over the controls, her mind sharp, her emotions in check. This was their moment. Humanity had been tested. Now, it was time to prove their worth. A single strike from the Leviathan could shift the tide of the war. "Fire!" Sharp ordered. The plasma beams from the Leviathan roared to life, racing through space with terrifying precision. The Gorvian flagship's shields flared brightly as the shots connected, the explosion rippling across the fabric of space. But the Terran fleet was not done. The second wave hit harder, this time bypassing the defenses, causing massive internal damage to the enemy vessel. For a moment, the Gorvian Empire faltered. It had taken a blow no one expected, and its might was diminished. But the Gorvian Emperor, a master tactician, had one last card to play. "Prepare for their final move, Admiral," Ross warned. The Gorvian flagship emitted a low hum, a high-pitched shriek that shattered the momentary silence. Its self-destruct sequence had been initiated. It was going to take the Terran fleet down with it. The final countdown. No! Sharp shouted, her heart pounding. It was a sacrifice, a desperate attempt to stop humanity from gaining the upper hand. But the Gorvian Empire had miscalculated. The Terran fleet was quick on their feet. The fighters, still weaving in and out of combat, were the first to react. They began to disrupt the Gorvian self-destruct mechanism, attacking the core systems of the flagship. The fight intensified, but humanity's resilience was unmatched. The USS Leviathan maneuvered around the impending explosion, narrowly escaping the blast radius. In the final moments, humanity's resolve turned the tide of the battle. The Gorvian flagship detonated in a brilliant explosion, but the Terran fleet was still intact, just barely. The damage was severe, but the Gorvian Empire had been defeated, and humanity had won. The aftermath. For the first time in history, the Gorvian Empire had lost. Their greatest weapon had been destroyed, their empire shattered. The galaxy would never forget the price of testing humanity. The Terran fleet had proven itself, and the universe would have to reckon with the consequences. As Sharp stood in the wreckage of the battle, staring out at the stars, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy, and the Gorvian Empire would never test them again. What would you do if humanity faced the impossible? Would you stand with them? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic stories where humanity stands against overwhelming odds. The stars glittered brightly across the vastness of space, a reminder of the galaxy's ever-expanding mysteries. The silence was deafening, a calm that followed the fury of battle. Humanity had won, but victory came at a heavy price. Admiral Kayla Sharp stood alone on the observation deck of the USS Leviathan, her eyes tracing the endless stretch of space. The cold metal of the ship's walls seemed to close in on her, but it was nothing compared to the weight she carried on her shoulders. The war was over, the Gorvian Empire shattered, and yet the cost of victory hung heavily in her heart. Millions had died, both human and alien alike. The Gorvian threat was no more, but the scars would remain. She ran her hand across the smooth glass of the observation window, staring into the void. "How many times have we fought to survive?" she whispered to herself. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The Terran Empire had faced its darkest hour, but now, with the war over, humanity was left to deal with the consequences of its actions. The galaxy, once teeming with an array of alien species, would never be the same. And neither would humanity. A galaxy forever changed. The peace that followed the war was more fragile than anyone could have imagined. The Gorvian Empire had once ruled with a level of arrogance that made them believe their reign was eternal. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now the galaxy had learned a hard lesson. But even in their defeat, the Gorvians had proven a powerful enemy, unstoppable in their wrath, and yet, in the end, they were crushed. It was not just the might of Terran weapons that had brought them down, but the will of every soldier who had ever fought for their planet. Humanity's spirit was unshakable, and that was something the galaxy would never forget. As the remnants of the Gorvian fleet scattered and fled into deep space, the Terran Empire was left to rebuild, not just their military, but their relationship with the stars themselves. Humanity had never been welcome in the council chambers of the galactic leaders. But that had changed. Victory had its consequences, and those consequences were felt beyond the battlefield. Humanity was no longer a fractured, disjointed collection of colonies. It had earned its place among the stars. But the question remained, could humanity live with the cost of their rise? How far was humanity willing to go to maintain its place in the galaxy? Kayla's personal reflection. Admiral Sharp walked to the communications console, her fingers brushing the cold surface as she activated the system. Her image flashed across the screen as she spoke to her fleet commanders. "We have won, but the war has changed us. It has changed the galaxy. We are no longer the underdogs. we will need to carry ourselves with humility, even as we stand tall. This victory is not one we celebrate lightly." She paused, her gaze hardening as she spoke. "The galaxy will watch us now. They'll remember what we did. The choice is ours. Do we become the tyrants we've defeated? Or do we work to ensure that such a war never happens again?" Her words were filled with the weight of experience, a lifetime spent in war, loss, and triumph. She knew that the Terran Empire had no easy path ahead. The Gorvian threat may be gone, but their legacy, their destruction, had forever altered the course of history. As she ended the communication, she walked to the viewports once again, staring out at the void. The stars were still beautiful, but they no longer offered the same promise they once did. Now they were a reminder of everything humanity had lost. The price of victory. Humanity had always fought to survive. They had fought to overcome the odds, to defend their homes and their way of life. But now they were left to face the aftermath. The Terran people had paid the ultimate price for their survival, and though they had triumphed, the scars would remain forever. The galaxy had learned the hard way that humanity was no longer something to be overlooked. The Gorvian Empire had believed that they could crush humanity without a second thought. And yet, in the end, it was humanity that stood victorious. But the cost was steep. Countless lives had been lost in the war. Colonies had been ravaged, planets had been wiped out, and entire civilizations had been decimated. The loss was not just in the physical realm. It was also the loss of innocence, the loss of the hope that diplomacy could solve all things. The galaxy, once a peaceful and expansive place, would forever bear the mark of the last war humanity fought. Other species now knew what humanity was capable of. The devastation they had brought would forever haunt the Galactic Council. Humanity had stood up against its enemies, against an empire that had dared to think it was unbeatable, and they had proven themselves. But as the galaxy turned its eyes upon them, they would have to answer for the consequences of their actions. Was humanity now a force for peace? Or was it the next empire waiting to conquer? As the USS Leviathan sat silently in orbit, waiting to return home, Sharp thought of the soldiers who had given everything to ensure humanity's survival. She thought of the countless ships that had been lost in battle, the men and women whose names would never be known, their sacrifices never fully appreciated by a galaxy that was too far removed from the bloodshed. The reflection was a heavy one. Humanity was no longer an underdog. They had earned their place, but the price they paid was one they would have to live with. Humanity had triumphed over its enemies. But as they moved forward, they would be forced to answer a new question. What kind of legacy would they leave in the stars? What would you do if humanity was pushed to the brink of extinction? How would you rise to defend everything you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing sci-fi HFY stories. Let's continue the conversation and see what humanity's next step will be.